Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our weekly SAIL College and Career Workshop. I'm Megan Faulkner, and I'm the program manager here at SAIL. So it's the Summer Academy to Inspire Learning. If you're new to us, or this is the first one of our programs that you've watched, we are based out of the University of Oregon, and we have summer programs as well as year-round mentoring. You can check out everything we have available on our website. I'll put the link in the description. We have a wonderful Instagram. You can put the link in there, and you can always email us. So just check down in the description for our contact information. So we have with us today a really wonderful guest speaker. Her name is Monica Becerra, and she's with the UO Counseling Center, so here at the University of Oregon. And she's going to share with us all about different ways that you can set yourself up for both for academic success and just for personal success, for taking care of yourself so that you can be the best person that you can be. So before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that, of course, we do these presentations for you, for our students. So our goal is to share some of the skills and knowledge you need on your journey to higher education and beyond. So please feel free to use that chat function that's on the YouTube live page if that's where you're watching us from. And you can ask us any questions at any point during the presentation, and we'll make sure that we answer them when we get to them. So please use that liberally. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Monica. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Megan, and I'm excited to share some information with you all. I'm a first-generation college student, and I was definitely lost a lot of the times in terms of what to do after high school. So I hope that some of the information I will share can be helpful to you, and given this information is information that a lot of my mentors gave me, so the presentation is an accumulation of different things that mentors have shared with me that I think can be helpful if you're thinking about pursuing a college degree, or if you just need extra time to think about what you're going to be doing for a career. So hopefully it will be helpful. And again, just feel free to ask any questions as I'm going. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, are you all able to see it? Okay, so as Megan mentioned, this presentation is not only for your academic success, but I also want it to be helpful for you. So you know how to maybe manage your own well-being and self-care. So there's 5 general pillars that I would consider all college students to be successful academically. And maybe some of you in high school have already actually started maybe building on some of these categories. So I'm going to be describing them as we're going, and also mentioning why they're important and also how to get yourself into them. So the first one is academics. Grades are important, but they are not everything there is to know. So good grades can help you get into a good college. It can open doors to different opportunities. But for academics, there's other things that you can do once you start college. For example, establishing relationships with your professors, or even in high school, a lot of the times you might need letters of recommendation, or if you're planning to start an internship, you might need a reference. A lot of things that students miss sometimes is visiting people during office hours, whether it's your professors or mentors or people that you know. I always encourage you to take advantage of those office hours. A lot of the times they do get a little lonely. And even when I was a TA, I always enjoyed when students would stop by my office, even if it was just to say hello or how to figure out strategies to study or succeed in the class. A good way to also strategize for academic success is to organize study groups. You don't have to do it alone. I often encourage students to seek out classmates if they know that they're particularly skilled in certain areas, or to get ideas on how to study differently. And at this point, you all probably know that there is a lot of reading in school, and sometimes it can be very difficult to read everything that's included in a chapter. So learning ways to read efficiently can be helpful. For example, sometimes when I was really rushed on time and just really needed to know what was the content of a chapter in preparation for a class, I would go over the content and I would maybe read a couple of first sentences for each paragraph. And sometimes I would go to the end if there was a summary. And even though maybe I didn't read everything, it still gave me an idea of what was discussed in the chapter. And same with note-taking skills. Sometimes we think that when people are talking or professors are giving a lecture that we need to write everything down. And the reality is that we only need to jot down whatever stands out the most, the important things. And sometimes professors do these things in different ways by either repeating important things, or they'll literally say, this is important to know for an exam. In those occasions, I would put exclamation points by my notes to remember that that was something important. The next thing is what I would consider impact activities, or sometimes research activities. As you all are starting to think of maybe what do you want to do for a career, or maybe you don't know, maybe you're uncertain of what path to choose or what major you want. And sometimes being involved in honors programs or research activities in college, or if there's any opportunities in high school, could be a good way of you understanding information in different ways, or understanding how information is created. Universities, a lot of the times, do have a research focus, and professors will sometimes have labs or be working on projects or have grants to fund certain projects or things that they're wanting to build on based on their own research interests. So seeking out a professor, or if you have an interest for a certain area, it doesn't hurt to figure out how can you get involved to learn more about research, or what does it mean to even do research, or for you to, if you have any questions about how things work or are created, that might be a topic for a research paper. A lot of honor programs in universities do have this focus, so that might be a different way to engage in it. Another, or a third section to academics is the practical experience. High school, I think a lot of the times can be a really good opportunity to focus on schoolwork and hone in on studying habits and reading and note-taking skills. But a lot of the times what is missing, and what might also be helpful to build on, is to have that hands-on experience, whether that's either taking up opportunities with people for an internship, or seeking maybe ways to shadow somebody if you're already thinking about a major, or any kind of career that you're pursuing. If you think about the people that are already in the field and seeking them out for opportunities for you to get involved, or just get a better understanding of what they do in their job, that can be a very helpful way for you to know exactly what is going on, or what would it mean for you to be a teacher, or what does the job look like for, say, a policeman. Asking these kinds of questions and looking for opportunities for you to be in that setting is a different way to also learn if the career might be a good fit for you or not. Same with seeking out any supervisors or managers. If any of you are thinking about a job or a summer job, just asking how did they land on their current job, or what helped them make a choice, can also be a different way for you to understand what led them to the career that they currently have. The fourth pillar that a lot of my mentors focused on and encouraged me to build on are leadership skills. Some of them do present during high school, and I would say it's even more important, probably so, during college, especially when you're starting to think about scholarship opportunities, fellowships, or even applying for an internship. A lot of the times they'll be looking for specific skills. You've probably heard about resumes or CVs. When you're applying for a job or an internship, they're going to want to know, what are you bringing to the table? What are things that you can offer, but also what kind of skills are you building on? Being involved in student organizations, clubs, or programs are not only good ways for you to build a sense of connection and community in a campus, but they also provide you with opportunities to take on responsibility. And when you're applying for different opportunities or thinking about careers, when you're in these settings, you can start thinking about, how much responsibility am I comfortable with? Can I see myself as a supervisor, as a mentor, um, or somebody that's overlooking other people? How comfortable do I feel with being a leader? Attending any kind of workshops or conferences are also good opportunities to better understand what other people in the field are doing, and also how are leaders maybe shifting or moving things in areas of your own interest. Um, Being involved in organizations, clubs, or programs, or anything that allows you to be a leader also shows that you're able to connect with people. And I would say that in most of my own experience, when I do any kinds of interviews, that's a very common question that I'm asked is, what do I bring to the table, but also how have I handled conflict? And in what ways do I relate to other? What does my team building skills look like? And if there's any kind of interviews you ever think about applying to, I would say those are like the main questions I've noticed that I am always asked is, what are you bringing to the table? How do you manage conflict, and how do you work with others? Or how would your coworkers describe you? And they want to know how you work with other people, if you're able to, and if you're able to work with a team. So I would really highly emphasize that you seek out opportunities for you to be a leader and take responsibility. So when you do seek out internship, or if you do have interviews, that you can speak of this from experience. And also being a leader in whatever areas of interest that you have, it shows that you have an interest for changing things, and whatever level of change you're comfortable doing also depends on the type of responsibility and leadership that you want to take. So leadership skills is something that I highly, highly encourage people to engage in and seek out. And if you don't know where to start, again, seeking out mentors or people that are already in leadership roles would be a good way to start. And then the last piece for academics, but certainly not least, is community service. And providing community service or being a volunteer in any kind of setting really helps you to understand the needs of a population. Whenever you think about a career or a job, you will most likely be serving somebody. And knowing who you're serving can be a really good way for you to understand what are the difficulties that a population is having, or how to help them. It also communicates that you want to be an advocate for change, that you want to see movement. And if there's something that you're unhappy about in certain environments or workplaces, doing community service can really help you connect with people. And I think a lot of leadership skills also are involved in community service. So if you haven't thought of, or maybe you already have, thinking about ways to be a volunteer, I think is not only helpful to build on those skills and connect with people, but I think people that hire also really like hearing how you've been involved or what else have you done besides school or academics. So I highly recommend that you think about maybe places to volunteer at. So keeping in mind all of those pillars of academic success, you might be wondering, okay, well, there's all of these things I already have to do. High school's already busy, and I have to do even more probably to be a competitive applicant for college or university. And even if you think about graduate school, a lot of these things that I mentioned are still going to apply. So college is still going to be a space and time for you to continue building on these pillars that I mentioned. So the very first thing that I would mention in terms of where to start is to create a mentor network. I used to think that if I just seek out maybe one person, they'll have all of the answers and they'll be able to guide me because they're doing what I want to do. But what I found out throughout my academic journey is that you actually need a community. You need a lot of people to help you go through your journey and also provide different perspectives of how to deal with conflict or decision making. So I would say try to build a mentor network. You could probably start in high school if there is a certain professor that you really connect with or a teacher. I would let them know, what are your interests? What are you trying to do? What are your future plans? And when you do that, not only are you building a relationship with a person, but this person can also keep in mind your interests. And maybe when they come across an opportunity, they might remember, oh, so and so mentioned that they were interested in a nursing program. And I just came across this internship opportunity that I think they'd be great for. Let me forward this information to them. And that's sometimes how you take a step into a door or how opportunities are being provided. So highly recommend you start thinking about, who is a teacher or a potential professor that you can reach out to. Next, I would say really take advantage of campus resources. In high school, take advantage of any opportunities that are offered to you. If you don't know how to do that, again, it doesn't hurt to ask, whether it's a teacher or somebody that you really trust, or maybe a friend or a peer. And if you're thinking about attending a university or a four-year college institution, this is something that I think is often overlooked is students sometimes just think about having good grades, and sometimes they forget about what else is on campus that they can utilize, not only to be successful academically, but also to build on different skills and open opportunities to different things. The next thing I would recommend is to seek out vocational counseling. And vocational counseling is really just an opportunity to discuss about career aspirations or what to do if you're thinking about a major, but maybe not being sure what to choose. Looking out for a counselor that can give you some guidance in terms of majors or careers can give you some ideas of what direction to go. And very often universities will offer courses that are called career counseling or introduction to college 101. So if you when you're thinking about signing up for classes, I would look for one of those that maybe give you a little bit more information about how to pick a major, or sometimes there's offices that are for students who are undecided or undeclared. Just go ahead and make an appointment. It's always helpful maybe to sometimes brainstorm with somebody than to try and figure things on your own. And lastly, I would say really take some time to really explore your interests and develop a plan. It's okay if you don't know immediately what you want to do for a career, or if you're having trouble picking a major. I think that's very common and very normal. I think a lot of students switch their major, and that's okay. You don't need to know exactly what you need to do right now. And even after you start attending college and you have a declared major, if you find yourself not being sure if that's the right fit for you, talking to somebody and switching is always an option. And with academics, of course, sometimes a lot of the times that leads to stress, and there's a lot of things to juggle and balance at the same time. So I really think that being mindful of your mental health and self-care practices are very, very important, not just because it impacts your performance as a student, but also because it's just helpful to have a good well-being, to know how to manage stress. Our quality of life is a lot better when we know what to do when we have a lot of stress in our life. So when we think about mental health is really the emotional, psychological, and our social well-being. It really represents how, or it affects how we think, how we feel and act, and it also determines how we're able to determine or handle stress, to relate to others or to make choices. So our mental health is really how we're feeling. And even thinking about it right now, maybe doing a scan with yourself and thinking about how you're feeling, that's your mental health. Sometimes we feel drained, sometimes we feel energized. And with self-care are the practices or the behaviors that you do to sustain a healthy mental state. But also they're preventative. When you think about, for example, when you get sick, you get a cold, you take vitamin C and medicine and you get better. But in order to not get, you'll still get sick later in the future again, but you still do some preventative measures to make sure that you don't get too sick, or that you recover sooner by eating healthy or doing exercise or taking vitamin C. So mental health is the same way. We need to not only do things to prevent our mental health from deteriorating, but we also need to do things actively to sustain it. Maybe right now, you all cannot answer to me, but if you think about stress, think about maybe in your mind, what signs and symptoms let you know that you are stressed? What tends to happen? How do you usually feel? Do you notice anything in your body when you're stressed? For some people, they know that they tend to get a little irritated. I know that when I'm stressed, I tend to fidget a lot more with my hands, or my stomach starts feeling upset. So those to me are things that indicate to me that are stressed. But I also know that when I don't get enough sleep, or when I feel overworked and don't have time at the end of the day to unwind and relax, that my stress levels tend to be higher. So think about right now, what things usually tend to make you stress? And given we are currently living through a pandemic, so I think that in itself gives us a lot of stress. And it's okay to be mindful of that. I think in times of current social disconnection and social distancing, that also contributes to our mental health, sometimes not being at its best. And although when we think about stress being this really negative thing to do, I also want to say, maybe just sharing this bell curve, that stress is not always bad. If you have very, very low stress or anxiety, a lot of the times that might be representing like boredom, fatigue, frustration. But we do need a certain level of stress or anxiety just to get us going. So, not too little that we don't feel motivated, but also not so much that we can't function or we start having a panic attack and start hyperventilating. So, there is an optimum level of stress to have that allows us to be creative and to act on what we need to do and meet those deadlines. So, thinking about where your stress is can also be a helpful way to know how to manage it. And um, further discussing, I want to share with you, when you do feel very stressed or when you just feel that you have a very low mood or very anxious, there are things you can do to actively help you get through those feelings. So, the first one that I think most of you are familiar with is distraction. I think we all are pretty good about this one. When we distract ourselves, that's a very immediate thing we do to get our mind off of whatever it is that we're thinking, feeling, or experiencing. Some good examples of this is, for example, I'm not feeling well. I'm going to pick up the phone and talk to a friend and just have this friend distract me from whatever it is that I'm experiencing. I think I often hear a lot of students watching TV shows. So YouTube or Netflix tend to be pretty good to goes. But also walking and exercise are also a different way to distract yourself. Reading, cleaning, or organizing, playing video games, as long as you don't spend too many hours gaming without drinking water or getting up, I think could be good ways to do that. Um, but just something to keep in mind with distraction is that distracting yourself from feelings of distress or when you're not feeling good can be helpful in the short term, but they might not lead you to feeling better on the longer term. So I would just caution everybody to use this with moderation as maybe an immediate intervention, but to really go back to thinking, what was I feeling maybe upset about or not good about, and sitting with that to better understand what is going on with you. A good way to maybe sit with what you are experiencing in the moment and being mindful of your thoughts and feelings are grounding exercises. I cannot stress this enough. All of you might hear, taking deep breaths and slowing down your breathing and taking your time to really focus on your breathing. Yes, it's one of those things that we hear, but also you hear it because it works. Whenever you think about stress and anxiety, our chest tends to feel very tight. And when we don't focus on our breathing, our body just tends to react to that. So, if there's one thing you could do that you can't think of if you're feeling not so great, is to focus on your breathing, to really take your time to take deep breaths and to slowly engage in them and be mindful of your breathing by either putting your hands on your chest or on your stomach, whatever helps you focus on breathing. Mindfulness and meditation, yoga exercises are also really helpful. With meditation, it doesn't always mean that your mind is going to go blank. Meditation and mindfulness, a lot of the times, is actually being aware of what is going on for you. And a lot of the times, this can look like sitting still for 5 minutes in your bedroom or your living room and just doing a quick scan to think, what am I thinking about? What am I feeling right now? And being aware about that. You might notice maybe some thoughts popping up, and that's okay. Meditation and mindfulness doesn't mean that you need to have a blank mind. It's actually being aware of what is going on for you and just observing it with a curious mind and kind of saying, oh, I'm noticing this thought of this deadline. I'm feeling anxious when I think about it. And it's just kind of observing it without necessarily worrying about it. Um, Exercise can also be a really good way to ground yourself. Whatever exercise you feel like doing. I know for myself, whenever I'm in middle of Zoom meetings, taking a couple of seconds to do jumping jacks can help me just stretch and get my body moving. Using your senses can also be very helpful as a grounding mindfulness technique. So even right now, you could do this by maybe noticing some things in your room or in the space that you are, picking up an object and describing it. What color is it? What texture do I imagine it is? How does it feel against my skin? Is there anything right now maybe that you can taste in your mouth? Does it feel dry? Did you maybe just eat something for lunch? Is there anything that you smell? And using your senses to bring yourself to the present moment, especially when you find yourself maybe having a lot of racing thoughts. Um, and things that you can touch, like slime or maybe stress balls, are really great. Whenever you feel stressed, to just focus and fidget with something might be a good idea too. Another thing you can do is emotional release. And this is a way to just externalize what you're feeling in a healthy way. I really like dancing by myself, even though I feel like it's sometimes silly. And I think that could be a good way to just get your body moving and distracting yourself. Crying is really good. I think a lot of the times when we try to hold it in, you might notice a knot on your throat and it doesn't feel very good. But once you allow yourself to cry and just get out whatever it is that you're feeling, we tend to feel a lot better. So sometimes even just scheduling some time to cry by either like listening to something really sad or watching a sad video to make yourself cry can be very healing. So I'd encourage you to take your time to cry if that's something that you feel like it would be helpful. On the opposite end, I'm looking for something that makes you laugh. Funny videos, I think YouTube is a good way to look for those. Punching a pillow, as long as you don't hurt yourself, but sometimes that can be a good way to release frustration. Talking to a friend that you trust. I really like making art, whatever that may look like for you. I think your artistic expression is a really good way to express what you're feeling when sometimes you don't have the words for it. And journaling. I think journaling can be one of maybe the best things to go to when you don't know what to do, is just writing things down. And you can either keep them or you can just write things down and then crumple up in a ball and just throw it out. But writing things out has been proven to be very effective to help reduce feelings of distress. So I highly recommend it. And if you think you're not somebody that journals, try it out. You never know, you might change your mind. And this one goes without saying. Self-love is very important. I know I mentioned towards the beginning that self-care is important, but I think when we think about self-care, it's not just thinking about the things that we do for ourselves to make ourselves feel better. Of course, I love rewarding myself with like ice cream when I feel proud of something or I was able to finish all my tasks at the end of a very busy day. So yes, self-love includes things like taking a bath or face mask, buying a small treat for yourself or cooking something. But I think above all, it's also talking nice to yourself. I think more recently, you might notice maybe a lot of negative thoughts because we're spending more time with ourselves. We're not engaging in the same amount of social contact as we used to before the pandemic. So maybe thinking right now, when you don't feel very good or when you feel bad about yourself, what is that voice telling you? Is that your voice, or what kind of voice is telling you that maybe you're not good enough, or that you're not pretty enough, or not handsome enough? Being aware of how you talk to yourself sometimes is one of the main things that contributes to our mood. A lot of the times, that voice is a bully. It's a voice that's putting you down, and it doesn't feel good when we hear other people say mean things to us. So it almost feels like, why do we do this to ourselves? Why do we compare ourselves to others? So be mindful of how you talk to yourself. Do you think your best friend would say those things to you? And to really think about, where are these thoughts coming from? Is this my voice, or what is telling me these negative things? Um, and self-love and self-esteem and confidence are not things that you just accomplish and it's it. I think these are things that you constantly have to work for. You might have some really good days, and you might have some days that maybe you struggle a little bit more. So if there's one thing I would hope for you all to do, is maybe by the end of this presentation to say one nice thing to yourself, or something that you feel very proud of. And continuing with the talk about negative thoughts, one way you could potentially challenge negative thoughts that you have about yourself is through a thought challenge. So the first step might be to, again, write things down, or maybe use your phone and write down, what are those negative thoughts? What is the negative self-talk that you're telling yourself? And then the next step would be to say, why are these things not true? For example, I might get, say, a C on a test I just did, and I might say to myself, I am so stupid. I can't believe I didn't get a better grade. I must be so dumb. But when I actually think about it, was this the only grade I got on this test, or have I done well in other things? I might say to myself, I'm telling myself that I'm dumb, but what proves that I'm dumb? Is it only this test? What disproves of it? Well, I've done better in all of these other classes. I got a good grade on this essay, or my teacher complimented me for participating frequently. So looking for things for why this might not be true can be helpful for you to kind of like do a reality check. Um, and as I mentioned briefly too, when you find yourself having negative thoughts, are those things you would say to your friend or a loved one? And I think the answer would be no. When you love and care for somebody, you don't want to be mean and a bully to them. So I would say try to be friends with yourself and treat yourself with that kindness. And another thing too that maybe goes related to some of the pillars that I mentioned is doing things that for others is a way to help ourselves feel better. When we do random kind acts of kindness, when we volunteer or do any kinds of activism, those things usually tend to bring meaning and make us feel good. So again, if you volunteer, not only are you engaging with a population you might potentially want to serve, but it also is a good feeling good thing that I think can help sometimes with our mood and our self-esteem. So if there's maybe one thing you can think about for today, think about a person and maybe one nice thing you can do or say to them. It might just be texting them, I was thinking of you today. I hope you have a good day, or leaving a note to somebody, or to your parent, maybe just saying thank you for something and giving them a hug. So maybe as a little task for the end of the day, I'd encourage you to do one act of kindness. And then lastly, there's a lot of self-care resources out there. Nowadays, with technology and the internet, you can type in ways to help manage your stress or depressive symptoms or anxiety. There's a lot of resources out there. So I'd encourage you to download any apps. Calm, Headspace are really good ones that I use, and I always enjoy. And a lot of them are free. So know that there are free options out there. Having some white noise also can be helpful. And white noise can be sounds like rain or having a fan when you don't want it to be purely silent to just help yourself focus. But I'll say the main thing is learning how to reach out. If you are struggling or you're aware of somebody else that might be struggling, reaching out is something that I always encourage, or referring a friend to a service if you're noticing that they're not doing well. A lot of the times that can mean a lot for somebody when you're kind and you just provide support. So definitely reach out. So that concludes the end of my presentation. And I do have some links to share some resources, and I'll welcome maybe any questions or any comments that any of you might have.
Monica, thank you so much. That was a really wonderful presentation. And I think a lot of people will get a lot out of it, especially right now. I think we're kind of running into a point where we're starting to think, many of our students are starting to think about going to college or what they're going to do next year, or kind of dealing with some emotions around if their schools are going to reopen or if they're going to be able to see their friends. So I think some really great tools there. I wanted to welcome Angel and Lolly, who are two of our sales staff, both to share some questions that Monica can answer, and maybe also to share any experiences that they want to share or tools that they find useful. So I'm going to turn the floor over to both of them too.
Thank you, Megan, and also thank you, Monica, for presenting about self-care and checking in with yourself, because I, as a first generation college student myself, second year study, you do get overwhelmed more than you can handle. So it's important that you practice skills and are aware of when you feel overwhelmed, how to deal with it. And if I had like been taught these skills like during high school, I feel like I would have been way better off, like even in high school and coming into college. So yeah, I feel like one of the questions we have is, let's see, how can you make sure to take care of yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question that I think a lot of us are probably wondering about. That is a very unique thing for every person. It can look very different for everybody. The main thing I would say taking care of yourself right now is not isolating. And I know that can be very difficult to do because of social distancing, but this literally means reaching out to a friend and letting them know, can we touch base for maybe like 30 minutes? If you're having a very busy schedule, setting a boundary can be helpful, or setting a Zoom call, or just going out for a walk or going to the grocery store. Even if you don't talk to anybody, but just seeing people can be a way to take care of yourself. But if anything, I always say, make sure you drink plenty of water and keep hydrated. So I would say those are some things to keep in mind.
Thank you. And then I'll let Lolly go.
Yeah. Another question we have is, why is burnout so common in college students?
Yeah. Well, to start, most college students don't have healthy eating and sleeping patterns. And when you think of burnout, sleep is one of the main things to go when you're a college student. To prevent burnout, the main thing I would say is really knowing how to establish boundaries. And sometimes this means saying no. So when you think about all the responsibilities that you have as a college student, you really have to prioritize where you're going to set your time. But this also means that even when you're very loaded with work, there might be temptation to just say no every time a friend invites you to hang out. I would say, maybe not everything might get done. Not everything will be maybe the same quality that you want, but knowing actually when to spend some time with friends instead of spending that extra hour studying might be a better investment, even if you do have a deadline.
Thank you.
So I got a couple questions following that up. So, as college students, when it's your first time kind of being independent, you kind of have to learn how to have a healthy diet, right? And
Mhm.
learn how to keep a pretty balanced sleep schedule, or just like a healthy sleep schedule. So what are some tips to keep a good sleeping schedule and a healthy diet?
I wish I kind of knew this answer because I feel like I struggled with this myself. I would say, with sleep, that's tricky because students have so much on their plate, and it's like, what is realistic? Um, I would say, as a college student, what would be probably more realistic with sleep, at least, is to make sure that you don't procrastinate. I know this is really, really hard to do sometimes when you don't find that you have a lot of motivation. But if you can think in advance for anything that has deadlines, that way you can protect your sleep, could be a very helpful way to do that. And trying not to engage in any kind of electronics before you go to sleep is also helpful, or not consuming like very high sugary things before bed, or large meals. If you can maybe substitute junk food for something healthy, even if your eating patterns aren't maybe the best, that will make a huge difference. And I'll add maybe not consuming so much caffeine. This might be a hard one for a lot of people, but even if it's not maybe the sleep and the eating that you want, but just doing those small changes can really make a difference. So when you go to the store and you decide you want a bag of chips, substitute that for an apple or some kind of fruit.
Yeah,
Kind of
thank
going
you.
off of that, we had a question about like bad self-care habits and how you can kind of quit practicing those, and like also kind of how to identify if a self-care habit is bad for you. Um,
Yeah. Well, again, self-care habits are different for everybody, but a good way to know if it's not a good one is after you engage in that kind of self-care habit, does it make you feel worse? A good example is alcohol. A lot of the times is a way for people to cope, but it actually doesn't make you feel better in the long term. Or if other people are hurt, or they maybe have a reaction to your to your um, strategies, that may also be another indication. So thinking about, is this actually making me feel better or worse? And if this is something that you've engaged in for a while, it might take a little while to kind of like being off of it, but it can be done. So I would say, reaching out to a teacher or a counselor that can help you, so you know that you don't have to do it alone. And also, practicing some of the self-care strategies that I just shared with grounding and mindfulness, and trying to substitute and practice that can be a starting point.
Yeah, on that topic of mindfulness and grounding yourself, ever since last year, I started to kind of meditate and do some yoga and kind of do some self-care habits that I really enjoy, and I feel like they're really beneficial for me.
Mhm.
But one of the reasons why I was even able to begin those habits or kind of practice that is the fact that I have my own personal space, right? Like in spring term last year when the pandemic first hit, I had my own room, my own dorm to myself. So I wasn't sharing it with a roommate. So that gave me the liberty to practice that. And I started to realize that a lot of people went back home, and when they're back home, they either have, their family members are with them, and they share rooms, and they don't really find that that personal and quiet and calm space for in order to practice that. So I mean, I remember like telling my friends, like, well, I mean, talking to my friends about that, and they would tell me sometimes they would go outside, but help a student who doesn't have like their own personal space to practice like grounding practice.
Yeah. Oh, that's a difficult one because I definitely grew up in a house with two younger brothers, so it was often loud. Um, sometimes that space doesn't maybe need to be like something physical. Maybe it can just be a moment. For example, when you shower, that might be an opportunity for you to have some privacy. So sometimes it just takes a little bit of creativity if you can't find a room where you can have that time for yourself. Maybe just taking a shower and having that time and maybe putting some music on so you can kind of block out whatever's going on might be a time where you just focus on, the process of showering and feeling the water.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. And I want to respect your time because I know that we got to snag you for an hour, but you have other things to do. But just wanted to say a huge thank you from us at SAIL, and I'm sure from our SAIL mentors here. Are really glad that we got to chat, and thank you to Lolly and Angel both for sharing your experiences. Monica, huge thank you to you for being here and for putting that presentation together for us. That means a lot.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. And if anybody has questions or wants additional resources, feel free to reach out and I'd be happy to share. There are websites out there if you're having questions about where to start for like career exploration that actually a lot of vocational counselors use and that I use. It's free on the web, on the internet. It's actually called ONET. So I'll leave the general name on the chat, and I'll share the links with you, Megan. So if any students want to reach out, that's a free resource. And I've actually used it in my work, and a lot of students don't even know that there's a website where you can answer a couple of questions and it gives you a code so you know what careers you might be interested in.
That's awesome. I think that's one that we don't utilize. So I'm excited to check it out.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect. Well, awesome. Well, I hope you have a wonderful day. And for everyone watching, we'll be back next week with another workshop at the same time, same place. So thanks, everyone.